Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good day to all of you, and also Yaran Doctor Rosaida. And for this video, we'll look at is charisma needed for leadership. So, what is charisma? So, this Max Weber in 1997 came up with this definition. So, basically, it's a quality of an individual personality which helps us to distinguish the individual concerned to be treated as a leader. So, in my opinion, it's just the ability of oneself to influence, persuade, and bring about a sense of loyalty in others into believing in vision, goals, or even the leader's version of reality. So, when we look at charismatic leadership, we tend to some characters throughout history may pop up in our mind. So for me, there are three people for this in this case. So we have Dr. Martin Luther King, Winston Churchill, and Steve Jobs. So there are different people in different areas of life. So this is one example of a speech. I have a dream speech by Dr. Martin
Freedom and
Luther King.
justice. I have a dream. My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream
All right. So as you can see, one of the important traits of a good charismatic leader is the ability to communicate his vision in to the public or to the people who are to the people working in the organization, or in other words, his subordinates. So this is there's a short history of what was happening actually. So he was fighting for the rights of African Americans against the segregations that was prevalent in American life during those times. And then um, some of you, some of you might felt emotionally influenced or awakened by his speech if you go through the video in YouTube. So this is also we can attribute this to as the result of the charisma effect, as suggested by Lee in his book of the same title, The Charisma Effect. And then we have Winston Churchill, who was the Prime Minister of Britain in World War II, and um, at that time France just had just fallen to Germany, and they were moving on to Germany was moving on to the to Great Britain. So they Churchill at that time, the Great Britain needed someone like Churchill, in order for them to communicate the vision, uh, the clear vision of the government of the country, and also someone to look up to during the time of distress. And he came up with this rallying call, and history, as you know, um, the Britons against all odds defeated the Germans during World War II. And then that brought us to the what charisma can help to achieve in an organization. And if you look at this is a study done by Robert J. House in 1977, and these are the effects. And as you can see, this if you can look at this, you would say that these are what Steve Jobs have accomplished in um, being CEO of Apple in both times. Alright, and according to his autobiography by Walter Isaacson, people working under Steve Jobs said that when they were working under him, time sort of felt so different, and they sort of are able to achieve much more than they think, much more than they think when not working with Steve. So that's those are the what does charisma can do to an organization. But is charisma really important in leadership? For me, not necessarily. And why? Because when you look at the previous example, Okay, the it is important when you try to bring about change. You need to communicate your vision, and also when you are navigating through times of distress, such as Winston Churchill just now. So the question is, will I be less of an effective leader if I do not have charisma? So I always advise my students that in order to be a better leader, you need to be just who you are. Of course, you can still refine, but because leadership for me is about being authentic, and there are some other qualities that people look for in a leader. Some other qualities, for example, sincerity and caring, and someone who actually listen. So I ask them, do you know your true self? Do you accept the good and the bad inside you? Why is this important? Because according to personality theory traits, for example, as developed by, as suggested by Carl Jung, and then developed by the mother-daughter Beyer Briggs, and even across the sea, the Singaporeans came up through a company called Research Communication International, headed by Dr. Shirley Lim. They came to Brunei last time, in which I also participated in. What we call PICS is also a personality traits, more like psychometrics. And also, as educators, we also have VARK tests. And Sir Conrad Robinson suggested that and individuals must find what is their true element. So all this suggested that we have natural inclination in certain area of habitat. Where is our comfort zone, and what added values can a person actually add to the organization? But they also, but that's our trying to figure out what's our natural tendencies. But then they also argue that personalities can also be learned, but it requires one to have to stretch in order to learn those traits or uh, perform those traits, and this can be you can get exhausted over for a very after a very long period of time, and and you have to be very careful. If you try too hard, then you might be perceived as not so genuine. So because back to what my slides just now, leadership is about being authentic, being who you are. So for example, when I set up teams for certain events or competition, I will always look at first what are the goals and what kind of activities are needed to accomplish the goals. So what kind of role can, for example, the students play in the team, and which part of their personalities should we draw upon. So for example, if there is a discussion, so you need someone who listens, who are good listener, and also are able are much more open-minded and are able to accept and not judge people's opinion. And that's very important when you are brainstorming. You don't want to people to quickly shoot down your contributions. So and then for example, if we need to sell the idea, if there is presentation involved, then you might need someone with charisma in order to be able to communicate effectively and try to make or influence the audience or the judges into believing that your group is the best. So it's actually situational, the way I see it. So charismatic leadership, you may need it in certain situation, but for certain situation you may not need it as well. So even if you need it, but the person may feel he doesn't have charisma, then you can either develop those areas or find complementing personality people, other leaders who can cover or perform those underdeveloped areas of your weakness. So you sort of outsource that side of the business, and more importantly as well, this the people that you will find, they actually, you can say that they might be opposite of you, and so you can have more insight on the opposite side of the spectrum, so you have a more complete view of and perception of any given scenario. So they can tell you on what are the things that you might have overlooked. So there are many other ways of leading. By Here are some of them, and most importantly, you need to be you must be the person who do what you say. So you walk the talk, not just saying it like most charismatic leaders do. They say, but do they walk the talk? So um, MIT Sloan Management Review also came up with this term called intelligent conservatism. So as opposed to um, charismatic leadership, they believe that CEO is more likely to succeed better than the charismatic leaders if he or she spends more time learning and listening than cheerleading. So they focus on two key points in listening actively. What does the people have to say, and tending to their matters, and also having in-depth understanding of the corporations help you to navigate better in trying to solve problems or coming up with solutions for your organizations. So and also we have to look at the downfall or the dangers of being too dependent on charismatic leaders. So for example, Steve Jobs of Apple, back then when he was ousted by the company, Apple was struggling, and now after his death, he Apple still, I think, has Apple truly replaced Steve Jobs? So what can happen is charismatic. When you are dependent on charisma, you might suppress individual thinking and leadership development in the subordinate teams, because people tend to just depend on the leader for solutions, depend on the leader to navigate navigate things through for them. And so when it comes to succession planning, this becomes a problem in trying to fill the gap, the very large gap, that was left behind by the very charismatic leader. So for me, in summary, charisma is not as important, but it is a bonus, and it is useful in certain situations, but not all the time. So most importantly, you must not try to be someone else. So because as a leader, you should be authentic. And that's all from me, and I hope you benefit from watching this video. Thank you very much.